It's been an unpredictably wild last 24 hours in British Columbia provincial politics, and I am here to break it down for you guys here today. I'm Wyatt Claypool, and before I get into the topics today, I just want to ask you guys to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and make sure we have as much reach as possible. More people need information on what's going on in this election, and very few people cover provincial issues like this. So, getting into it, yesterday, BC Premier David Eby suddenly declared that he might get rid of the provincial carbon tax if the federal government does it first. This is a really big tell that Eby and the BC NDP know that their re-election chances are slipping away. The BC Conservatives and John Rustad definitely have momentum, and Eby would not be doing this unless he was seeing internal polling that was confirming some of the public polling showing the Conservatives starting to edge ahead. Not only edge ahead, but I guarantee you, and this is what I've seen both from talking to people at the doors as a BC Conservative campaigner, as well as studying other polls, the enthusiasm gap between NDP supporters and BC Conservative supporters is wide. And so Eby needs to try and differentiate himself from the hyper-progressive NDP brand that he has constructed. He is an activist through and through, but now he's going to try and emulate Wab Kinew and more recently Jagmeet Singh in going against the carbon tax for working class type reasons. Even though they do not actually care about working class people, they just know that their position on the carbon tax has become extremely unpopular. This is all quite funny, knowing that it was just a few months ago that Premier David Eby attacked federal Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre for asking him, politely mind you, sent him a written letter asking him to get on board with the Axe the Tax movement. Wab Kinew, the Manitoba NDP premier, jumped on board. He was happy to embrace Pierre Poilievre's position against the federal carbon tax, but David Eby literally said that Pierre Poilievre and his Conservative Party campaign is like a baloney factory. I want to bring up the exact quote here, but Pierre Poilievre slammed David Eby just this morning for this obvious flip-flop. Here's what David Eby said. I want to see what date it was. Yeah, this was March 15th, 2024. This year, this is what David Eby said. This is a quote from Eby. He says, "I don't live in the Pierre Poilievre campaign office and baloney factory. I live in BC. I am the premier and decisions have consequences. The fact we face is that if we follow Mr. Poilievre's suggestion, there would be less money returned to British Columbians after April 1st than there would be if the federal government administered this increase directly." What was he even talking about? BC actually just takes in all of its carbon tax revenues and puts it into general revenues. It doesn't go towards any green initiatives. It doesn't go towards rebates. It is purely just a tax so that the government can spend more on whatever it wants. But he was pretending that if the provincial government got rid of its carbon tax, then the BC residents would be hemorrhaging money because it would go towards the federal government and not to the BC government, as if the BC government is spending it on anything useful for the residents of British Columbia. It is one of the most unaffordable provinces to live in the country, and I don't see anyone fearing the loss of the provincial carbon tax. In fact, if Eby got rid of the provincial carbon tax right now, even though I don't like the federal carbon tax either, at least people would get part of their money back in a rebate. So if he got rid of it now, people would get the rebate, and then in a year when Pierre Poilievre is likely the prime minister, people could just keep all of their money because the carbon tax will be gone coast to coast. But I want to jump over to what Pierre Poilievre said about all this, because in the context of how popular Pierre Poilievre is, this was a stupid move for David Eby to make. Like, it's a smart move in the sense that the carbon tax is stupid and you shouldn't be in favor of it, and getting rid of it is the right move. But in the current political situation that David Eby is in his re-election effort, this just makes him look weak. he looks like he doesn't believe any of his positions, and he's willing to shift on them in a dime. Same thing with the crack pipe vending machines. Suddenly, all the crack pipe and snorting kit vending machines right in front of ERs around BC that he absolutely knew were there. It's not like the government doesn't know what's in its own hospitals. Suddenly, they're all under review because the BC Conservatives pointed them out. It became a viral issue of people who haven't visited ERs in a while realizing how insane the BC NDP government is. But they're under review now, so it's not an issue. Oh, David Eby's rational enough to put the crack pipe vending machines under review as if they should have ever been approved at all. He literally funded a study trying to figure out whether or not all public washrooms should be turned into consumption sites. They funded that study to millions of dollars. But as soon as it was pointed out by Adam Zivo at the National Post, oh, it's ridiculous. We were never going to use that plan. It was just studying the issue. Why do you need to study something that stupid? And as many have pointed out online, what the government's going to do is just put all the stuff under review, and then right after the election, if they win, they'll just bring it all back and say, actually, it was super good that we were giving crack pipes out through vending machines. And anyways, I'll just move on in a second here, but I have to quickly sorry about that. Anyways, and then I just want to quickly get into the exact thing that Pierre Poilievre said now. He said, "Baloney factory, that is how the NDP leader labeled my axe the tax demand 6 months ago. Who is full of baloney now?" And I think that is exactly the response most BC residents are going to have to David Eby saying this. One, David Eby is not actually saying that he's going to get rid of the carbon tax. He's putting a bunch of stipulations on it, which means he's not actually going to do it. He's effectively waiting to see if Justin Trudeau recovers in the polls or not. Because if Trudeau recovers enough that maybe he could win another minority, I heavily doubt it, then David Eby presumably would just keep his provincial carbon tax. So he's trying to stake a new position while not actually staking a new position. He's not getting rid of the provincial carbon tax. He's only getting rid of it if the rest of Canada does it first, which means he's still in favor of the carbon tax. And this is something very, I think, important to note on why it's bad for David Eby to be antagonizing the federal Conservatives. As strange as it sounds, for David Eby to be reelected, he actually needs some crossover voters from the federal Conservatives. I really don't think that's going to happen. That's why I already think that David Eby is dead in the water. But look at this. This is the latest Ipsos poll that came out that put the Conservatives at 45%. There's a couple of recent polls that put them at 45%, but this is the specific regional results for British Columbia. It's 54% federal Conservatives, 23% Liberal, 17 NDP, 4% Green, 2% PPC. 54 is a higher rating than I've seen from other polls, but other polls put the federal Conservatives at 50%, 45%, 47%. Very good results for the federal Conservatives. And so if the BC Conservatives can even perform anywhere in the ballpark of the federal Conservatives, they probably win this election. For David Eby to win, he needs a good 5 to 8% of federal Conservatives to be willing to vote for him instead of John Rustad. Now, that really doesn't make any sense because if you're voting for Pierre Poilievre, you probably agree with everything John Rustad has to say because they tend to overlap very heavily on policy. To vote for Pierre Poilievre and David Eby would be an irrational decision because you're saying, I don't like the federal carbon tax, but I do like the provincial carbon tax. Until 24 hours ago, apparently, now David Eby is trying to pretend that he is somewhat aligned with Pierre Poilievre. And if you vote for Poilievre on a federal level and Premier Eby is still in office, well, then he will get rid of the provincial carbon tax in line with Pierre Poilievre. He's trying to thread that needle between people who, for some reason, don't want to vote Rustad, but will vote Poilievre on a federal level, and then might park their vote with Eby again, even though Eby's policies are far more to the left of Justin Trudeau or Jagmeet Singh. His safe supply programs, his anti-police stances, the SOGI 123 in schools, the incredibly high taxes are something that even Jagmeet Singh and Justin Trudeau are not proposing publicly. And so I think this is a interesting gambit from Mr. Eby, but I don't think it's going to work out. I actually made this meme yesterday because it seems like David Eby is pretty much pretending like he is a more conservative candidate than he is. And soon we will be living in a world where David Eby will throw on a conservative hat just to signal that maybe he's an okay person to vote for. But in response to all this, we have John Rustad here, the BC Conservative leader, saying, "Today, Premier David Eby has announced that he is running against his own policies and the record of his NDP government. Eby's sudden about-face on the punishing BC NDP carbon tax is mealy-mouthed attempt to completely reverse on his failed policies." I should stop reading on this show. I'm always bad when I read. But yeah, basically, he is just trying to flip-flop, pretend that he doesn't support the things that he does support. And again, it just makes David Eby look weak. David Eby looks like a man who's drowning and willing to do absolutely anything, flailing about in the water, trying to save himself. I don't think it's going to work because, one, it makes him look weak in front of his own progressive supporters, who many of which might actually go and vote Green now because at least the Greens are proud about their carbon tax support. David Eby still supports the carbon tax, but he's kind of like embarrassed about it at the same time. And if anything, this again ties his fortunes to Justin Trudeau. He is basically saying that, yes, I support Justin Trudeau keeping the carbon tax, because if he didn't, he would get rid of his provincial carbon tax and then demand Trudeau get rid of his federal one, because the provincial one is far more punishing than the federal carbon tax, because at least, and it's weird I have to say this about Trudeau, at least Trudeau gives you the rebate. It still doesn't cover the entire cost. Trudeau lies about that, but at least you get something back. David Eby takes your money and then spends it on crack pipe vending machines, spends it on free government meth. That's a terrible, he's not somehow more conservative just because he's making this slight consideration that if the federal carbon tax goes away, he might get rid of the provincial one. He's just frankly like fooling around, pretending like he can shift on policy through mere statements about like what might happen in the future. But what's your policy now? David Eby's policy now has not shifted, and that's his issue. Conservatives aren't going to come over and vote for him just because of this, and now he's ticked off his progressive base that he relies on very heavily. Anyways, that should be it for me today, guys. If you live in BC, please donate to the BC Conservatives. I have a link below for you to do that. It will go to the Abbotsford South EDA. What we are doing, since I am the manager for Abbotsford South for the BC Conservatives, we are taking in money and we are going to package it up and send it to ridings in need. We evaluate who has good chance of winning and who needs the resources, and then we target it to them so they can buy more lawn signs, more literature, place local ads, all that sort of a thing. So if you live in BC, at least donate $100. You get $75 back, since you get 75% of your money back up to $100. And then if you don't live in BC, you can always support this show by donating to the TNT Legal Fund in the description of this video below, as well as in the pinned comment at the top of the comments. Anyways, that's it for me today, guys. Sorry for being rambly. It's just a lot of news, and I have to, go out and start door knocking again. My day is very chaotic. I wake up in the morning, do campaign stuff, come back here, film a video, get up, go to campaign stuff, go to an event in the night, and then, try and fall asleep. Anyways, bye.